The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet, a weekly program providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne. Coming up, as mass shootings continue to affect our country, organization Protect Ed offers bulletproof bookshelves aimed to de-escalate violent situations and save lives. The CEO joins me to discuss this effort. How will these bookshelves help protect lives? Then, in an effort to support Black and Brown businesses struggling to recover from the effects of COVID, community development nonprofit LISC NYC hosted a small business listening tour. Senior Executive Director of the organization joins me to discuss their efforts. Why are minority-owned businesses still struggling? After that, Luis Torres, also known as the Bronx Principal, joins us to discuss his new role as president of the NYC Elementary Schools Principal Association. How will this impact Bronx students? And finally, not-for-profit organization Bronx Community Health Network offers mental health first aid training aimed to combat the mental health crisis. BCHN's health educator and outreach specialist joined me to discuss this program. How will this program assist those struggling with mental health issues? So please stick around. Open BxRx Tuesday starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. As mass shootings continue to affect our country, one organization found a way to protect classrooms across America. Protect Ed offers bulletproof shelves aimed to de-escalate violent situations and save lives. Let's take a look at this clip.
Number 1, 8. Very good. Excellent. 2. This is a code red lockdown.
In the United States, there are an average of 2 mass shootings per day. How do you protect your children?
Back against the wall. Back against the wall. It's going to be okay. We're safe. We're safe.
Keep those around you safe and protected.
CEO of Protected Rooms, Peter Facchini, joined me to discuss their life-saving effort. Peter, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I want to jump a little bit backwards before we go into the interview. I understand you have some background in the military. Can you tell me about that experience and how that prepared you for where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I spent 20 years in the United States Army. All 20 years of that was within a special operations unit. So really, prepared me 2 different ways. One is the way we look at problems. And then 2 is put the emotional fire in me, and having been deployed, around the world and seeing fear in children. I just felt like every time there was an incident, I was in the room with those children because I've seen that face before. So, and I've seen the fear in their face. And so that's, really the 2 things that the military gave me, as far as experience and training, when it came to coming up with a solution.
Now, can you tell me about your organization, Protect Ed?
Yeah, so Protect Ed, we founded Protect Ed in 2020. We actually formed as a group in 2014 after a little bit after Sandy Hook, and started working on a solution. We finalized, who we are today, January of 2020. And that includes the group, the four of us, as well as the product. And the group comprises of a co-founder and designer, Tim Cahalan, who had he's an artist and furniture designer and architect by trade. And then the other two members, Jake Ali and Tom Ackenbauer, worked with me in the military on my last assignment, and they joined shortly after retiring out of the military themselves.
Now, I also understand that the situation with Virginia Tech also played a role in this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that experience? And it's just so crazy to even say, because that means it's been even longer that we've been dealing with this issue.
Yeah, at first, Virginia Tech. I was actually deployed to Afghanistan when Virginia Tech happened, and the thing that struck me was the length of time that incident went on, and I just remembered seeing the news clips and then hearing the story, and how is somebody going on running around a campus for 30, 40 minutes, up to an hour, and still being able to attack and injure people. So that gave me the idea of can we come up with a solution to really help people barricade themselves during a violent event.
Now, when did you know our country needed an alternative solution when it came to mass shootings?
Yeah, I think right from the instance, Virginia Tech kind of sparked the idea, and then Sandy Hook really solidified that the action that I wanted to take. And we're not an alternative solution. We're not really a solution. We're just an additional layer to try to help preserve lives and save lives. So by no means is this a solution to the problem of gun violence or anything. This is more of a last stand, or when all the systems fail and you find yourself standing in a room and there's a gunman outside that door. You have our product to safeguard yourselves and others within the room.
I'm actually glad that you clarified that, because I think that's very true. We often are looking for solutions and we want to find things to fix the problem, but it's not like that's going to fix the problem. It just helps save lives. So I'm so glad that you clarified that for me. Now, for those who don't know, can you let us know what are teachers advised to do now in the event of a mass shooting? And we'll get to how your product is going to help with that.
Yeah, so it varies. It varies by state and school districts, right? But bottom line is teachers, for the most part, are without specifically discussing, what they're trained to do. But they want to close the door, they want to barricade the door, and they want to stay out of sight of the window. So our product does that for you. Our product is a single piece of furniture that's designed to move in front of the door, and then it latches into the wall. So that is a better option than the teacher and students within the classroom grabbing all the furniture they can and piling it against the door. So our product's less chaotic and quicker. The other thing is our product actually locks into the wall. So unlike other furniture that's stacked against the door, that can be pushed away once someone makes it through the door. And then our product blocks the view of the classroom. And the last thing that nothing else offers is we have the psychological effect of our product, which is the mirror on the back. So as the violent offender is looking through the window, or if he is able to open the door, he'll see a reflection of himself. And we just hope, that de-escalates the situation, at a minimum by time. But we want to save all lives. So, whether it's the violent offender or the people within the room. So that's we're trying to throw. We're trying everything to totally de-escalate the situation.
Wow, I didn't know about the mirror aspect, so I'm really glad that you added, like you told me about that, because I think that like you said, it's just an added layer, and I think it kind of sends a deeper message just in general. So I'm actually happy that you brought that up. Now, can you tell us a little bit, how can people be sure it can withhold attacks?
Yeah, so we've had it independently tested amongst SWAT teams throughout the U.S. as well as some military units, right? And this is, it buys you time, and it provides you some ballistic protection, right? So, the standard person with the standard, hammers or sledgehammers or pry bars will not be able to make it through this product. And again, that's been tested and verified by law enforcement and military units.
So I want to go into a little bit more about how it works, and we actually do have a clip about, how it's supposed to work. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So, it's a working piece of furniture within a classroom, right? Ours just happens to be a bookcase or a storage shelf. And once you're alerted, a teacher will simply, or anybody can simply move over to the bookcase, unlatch it from the anti-tip bracket, and then it simply rolls into place on 4 heavy-duty casters. So it's independent from any system that attaches it to a place while moving. So it's not a rail system or anything like that. It's simply a bookcase on 4 casters. You roll it in front of the door, and then you press it against the latch plates that are attached to the wall, and it locks into place.
Now, do you think there may be a challenge getting these shelves inside schools?
I mean, the challenge we have is that there's so many products out there, and we don't ever deter anybody from using any other product because, we look at it as a layered approach, and the more stuff you can put in place, the more layers a violent offender has to get through. I think the biggest problem we have really is probably getting people to realize that it can actually happen there, and it can actually happen to you, rather than the mindset of this will never happen here.
So your organization says this will demilitarize school security. Can you further explain how?
Yeah, I mean, we're basically taking a piece of furniture that fits into a classroom. We're taking a piece of furniture designed to be in a classroom, and it's a bookcase or a storage shelf first, and then we just added some additional features to that to make it, a security product. So you really wouldn't know it's a security product until you needed it for an incident.
That's very clever. I like that. Now, is this available to all schools in the U.S.?
Yep, it is available to all schools throughout the U.S. You simply contact us through our website, and you'll fill out an inquiry form, and we will reach back out to you to help facilitate the ordering process.
Now, one thing that I also wanted to mention is I understand that kids can also be a part of their own safety, and this is easy for kids to maneuver. Can you explain why that was important for you and how so?
Yeah, I mean, we don't get to control the circumstances within the classroom. We don't get to control, who gets hurt, who doesn't get hurt. We don't get to control where adults are and where children are. So we felt to maximize the potential of saving lives, we had to make this easy enough for an adult to move around as well as 2 children. So, it does take 2 children under 30 seconds to emplace and lock in. And again, that's a much shorter time than it would take them to take a bunch of furniture and stack it against the door.
Now, how can people learn more about Protect Ed?
So if you go to our website, protectedrooms.com, we have a lot of information on there. It covers the different sectors or that our bookcase can be used in, or storage shelf. And it gives great information on the specs of our bookcase if you're wondering on the size, what type of space you need, and things such as that.
All right, Peter, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. As many businesses make their way on the road to recovery, minority-owned businesses struggle to keep up. In an effort to support Black and Brown businesses facing the effects of the pandemic, community development nonprofit LISC hosted a small business listening tour. Senior Executive Director of the organization, Valerie White, joins me to discuss the tour. Valerie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, minority-owned small businesses are still dealing with the effects of economic devastation following the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is this an issue for minority-owned businesses specifically?
Well, minority-owned businesses historically have operated at a deficit. They've always operated with less access to capital, access to networks, access to opportunities. And they support also very small communities, the commercial quarters. So the fact that they've operated technically month to month for the most part for many years because of the systemic inequities, when you layer on top of that the impact of the pandemic, which was much more devastatingly felt in communities of color where minority-owned businesses generally are operating, it keeps them at a point where it's just very tenuous at best for their existence.
Now, what are some challenges facing minority business owners? And I wonder, are they a direct cause of racism and discrimination? And is that stopping them on their recovery?
I think that's a big part of it. I mean, when you talk about systemic inequities for minority-owned businesses, generally it's access to capital. The businesses, particularly Black and Brown businesses, Latinx businesses, don't necessarily have the same opportunity to capital. They don't have the same relationships with the banks. Sometimes the algorithms or the methodology to determine who will get a loan is hurtful to a minority based upon just where they're located at or other characteristics. So that in and of itself is tremendously negatively impactful to the businesses. But again, the pandemic that followed or that came a couple of years ago actually just added on to that and exacerbated their already difficult conditions.
Now, this road to recovery is especially long for those in the Bronx. Why is this an issue for the Bronx as well? And how are we seeing those challenges be exacerbated?
Well, the Bronx does have certain pockets of high concentration of minority-owned businesses and one of the lowest poverty indexes in the country, particularly in the South Bronx. So you have a community that just has not had its fair share of access, of opportunity, of services in general. And then you have these other conditions that are surrounding minority-owned businesses in these pockets of areas. So for the most part, we want to be able to look to the Bronx and provide the needed resources, technical assistance, financial investment to allow these businesses to be able to operate in a positive manner.
Now, we know that COVID-19 was especially hard for businesses, especially minority-owned businesses. But I wonder, were they also facing these issues even prior to the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. As I stated when I first began to speak, we have seen systemic racism, systemic inequities that have been part of the existence for minority-owned businesses, and it has prevented them from creating an environment or achieving equity in operating their businesses. So you have those, but it was further exacerbated, not just by the pandemic. Everybody suffered from the pandemic, but communities of color like the South Bronx, which we're talking about today, or where we had our listening tour, had even more negative impact and felt the pandemic much more drastically than other neighborhoods. So you have those two things coming together just to make things extraordinarily difficult for that community and for the businesses that operate there.
So as you mentioned, you did host a minority-owned small business listening tour with your organization. Can you just tell us about that effort to just address the issues that we're seeing for those businesses?
Yeah, so what we are doing at LISC, and LISC stands for the Local Initiative Support Corporation, we actually raise capital and invested in underinvested communities and to support programmatic efforts to assist marginalized populations. So what we have been doing to support some of the work that we had did early on in the pandemic, we actually raised $4 million between 2020, April 2020, and now to give out to businesses across the city. But we decided after, dispersing and deploying that capital, that what we also needed to do is to sit and speak with businesses, identify what their challenges are. This was a result of a survey that we took in April 2021, and the results were just devastating. Businesses felt that they would not be operating within 9 months. They couldn't pay their next commercial rent payment. They were having workforce issues that were keeping them from continuing to service their clientele. The digital divide was just huge. So we wanted to just actually go from borough to borough and sit with the small businesses and hear what their concerns are and see how we can address it through advocacy policy-wise and legislatively, but also raising money from funders and philanthropic sources to stand up programs to assist.
Now, how did you guys come up with the idea to have a listening tour? This was something new to me and I've never heard of it before. So why did you guys decide to go with that method and that approach?
Well, like I just said, the survey provided some startling statistics. And in order to really sit down and hear the concerns of the minority small business communities, particularly those that are located in the commercial quarters across the city that house marginalized and minority populations, we could take the information we got from the written survey and utilize that to spur discussions to get to the heart of some of the key issues that those businesses are facing. And that would provide us with information on how to advocate, both sit in the city legislature, in the state legislature, and federally, develop policy and contribute to policy development, but also go speak with our funders, our investors that have interest in ensuring that minority-owned businesses are successful, and we can raise funds to support programmatic efforts to help, continue to provide resources to these businesses.
Now, this is a vulnerable community, when we're talking about minorities and just people of the Bronx, and it requires help from all levels of government. Can you explain what that may look like?
Well, we are looking to ensure that as government is considering aid, whether it's federal, state, or city aid to minority-owned businesses or particular neighborhoods that have, had much of a more difficult time with COVID, that there is a consideration for the small businesses. Of course, small businesses in these commercial quarters, in these neighborhoods, bring a sense of economic stability, many times a cultural foundation, are generally the biggest employers in those neighborhoods, and small businesses provide jobs and opportunity for workforce development. So all of those things tie together in an ecosystem. So as federal, state, and city legislators are making, or developing and implementing new laws, looking at program and policy implementation, we want to be sure that these elements are all incorporated in a way that they work together to collectively lift up the community that benefits from the programs or the legislative actions.
Now, elected officials were also present during the tour. Just in general, what do you hope they took away from that experience?
Well, I was very pleased that there were quite a few representatives from elected officials, and even one actual elected official there herself, the local assembly member. And what I think they took away from that tour is understanding the real needs of the businesses, which I think they had somewhat of an inkling of what businesses were dealing with, but also understanding where there are resources that could be coupled together to assist businesses in their communities. So because the resources may be different, right? We were at SOBRO, the South Bronx Economic Development Corporation. They had a variety of services. We at LISC have a variety of services. Generally, it's surrounding capital deployment, either to businesses or to organizations like SOBRO, so that they can assist the businesses. There was a lot of discussion about available programs through the city's state small business services agency that some of the businesses weren't aware of. So the key thing is, number one, that the legislators, representatives that were there had an understanding of these different programmatic, availability for the businesses, but also how do we figure out to put together a clearinghouse of information and then disperse it and disseminate it in the community, the small business community, so that small businesses can take advantage of the particular program or services that they need to be successful.
Now, you've been working in this field and you know a lot about it, but what's something that you can say that you've learned from the listening tour?
Oh, I've learned a lot. I learned how diverse of industries do we have in the minority and business community. And sometimes we do know that primarily when you're talking about commercial quarters in certain neighborhoods, generally these are personal service and the retail industry. But, it's always good to have a reminder that there is a plethora of different indices where minorities are business owners or entrepreneurs. So constantly remembering and reminding myself that those businesses are there. And then starting to think about, there's some common, needs that all businesses have: capital, patient capital, grant capital, lending, legal, HR, accounting services. But there are some special, specific, customized services that are appropriate on an industry by industry basis. So just remembering that as a provider and an intermediary that invests in the provision of services, and ensuring that we are touching on the customization that's needed to support the well-rounded amount or number of industries that minority and businesses are in.
Now, how can people stay up to date with your organization?
Well, we welcome everyone to follow us on social media. We have a very active LinkedIn page as well as a Facebook page. We're LISC, LISC NYC, and that is our handle in both our social media. We are very active there with the different programs, commentary, opinions on policy development, as well as opportunities for funding, grants, or participation in some of the events that we get. The other way is to follow us on our website, peruse it periodically, because there we'll also have all of the information I just mentioned, but the ability to register for our events. And we are at www.lisc.org/NYC. That's www.lisc.org/NYC. And we're always updating with a lot of different information, exciting marketing tools. So we just ask everyone to follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and also on our website.
All right, Valerie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I hope to see you again.
Same here. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. Our next guest previously visited the show as an NYC principal discussing new protocols and the effect of COVID-19 on public schools. He now joins us again as president of the NYC Elementary School Principal Association. Luis Torres, also known as the Bronx Principal, stops by to discuss his new role. Luis, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. I love being on Bronx.
Now, when we last spoke, we discussed what back to school was like in the wake of COVID. How has the public school system been like in regards to COVID since then?
It's been incredible. They're so happy to have the children back into school. I'm happy to be back into school myself. And it's just, it's a different feel to be back with the children in the school building and doing the work. A lot of our children struggled during the pandemic because of the virtual learning.
Now, you were recently announced president-elect of the New York City Elementary Schools Principal Association. Can you first tell me about that association?
Yes, it's a professional development organization that was established to provide professional development support to the elementary schools across New York City. It's a very big organization. It's a big responsibility. I'm going to take it to another level. I'm going to not only provide professional development support, but I'm looking to get more resources for the elementary schools and really just, put the organization on the map and make it a strong, viable professional development organization.
Now, I thought this was really interesting. Why was it important for the organization to have a focus on elementary school?
Yeah, elementary school is where the children build their foundational skills. It's where it all starts. Before in the past, people would always wait till the children got to high school and middle school to try to provide supports and interventions. We realized that we have to start at the early grades. If we wait till middle school and high school, it's too late. So it's very important that we get our children off to the right track. They should all be reading by the time they leave elementary school. And we should also be able to provide a lot of mental health supports and get them, a strong foundation.
Now, what responsibilities will you have with your new role as president?
Yeah, as president, I'm gonna, make sure that all principals, elementary school principals, have the supports that they need to be successful. If there are any schools that don't have programs or resources, I'm going to work with those principals to try to get them those resources that they need. I want veteran principals to adopt new principals and help them to become effective principals in the system. So I'm taking on a lot. I'm going to try to be innovative and creative in the way I lead this organization and see how I can better support the principals across New York City so that all principals can be successful and all children can benefit from the quality leadership in the schools.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of elementary schools again, because like you mentioned, it is the foundation for, all of the education of the kids in our city. Do you think elementary schools have a bit of a harder time getting these resources and getting that support?
I say that, it depends. There's a lot of investment in middle schools, right? And we understand why, and a lot of investment in high schools, because usually that's where the children need the most support. But what the pandemic showed is that elementary schools need equal amount of support, because if we don't work with the children at the early grades, they're going to have a harder time in the middle schools and high schools. We need to really focus on bringing more programs for the elementary schools so that our children can build the foundational skills that they need to be successful in middle school, but also so that our families can get back on track, parents can go back to work, and we can really move as a society and as a community forward. We need to make sure that elementary school children also have the nutrition and the other things that impact them as far as education, making sure that they get their eye exams, making sure that all the priorities that usually come before education are taken care of, which are food, shelter, safety, health, and access to technology. So once we ensure that the elementary school children have all these foundational things in place, then they can be truly successful in life.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about your experience as a New York City principal? And I wonder, what will you take from that experience, everything that you've learned and continue to learn, and how will you bring that to your new position?
So I've been a principal for over 18 years, and I will continue to be a principal as long as the passion and drive is there, and I'm having an impact on my community. What I hope to do is be able to be a model and a support to my colleagues, and be able to get them the resources and teach them how to hustle and beg, like I've been doing for all these years, to get those resources for their schools. And I just hope to be a model for them, and be able to do some of the hard work so that their jobs and their lives are easier. But it's always about modeling and showing them that anything is possible if you work hard and you're willing to do it for the children.
What are some current concerns New York City principals, I guess, in elementary school have right now?
Yeah, I'm afraid of one thing, and I'm gonna be honest. I'm afraid that we're going to go back to the digital divide. During the pandemic, we sort of did a lot of great work around ending the digital divide, making sure all children have devices, making sure that the internet access was available to the children. But little by little, I'm starting to see a slowdown in that effort. I think we need to still continue to invest in technology, making sure all children have a device in their hands. And we have to continue to push that initiative. I'm afraid that we will go back and then we'll start again seeing children who don't have devices. So if anything, as a leader and as someone who is conscious of that, one of my roles and missions is to keep the digital divide closing to the point where it's no longer an issue.
So we talked about COVID a lot, and I think it's necessary just when you're talking about education in 2022. Can you speak to the resiliency a lot of New York City teachers and principals had to display just to make it throughout, 2020, 2021, and now 2022?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a challenge every day, to wake up and have the energy to do twice as much the work that you would normally do, but also trying to stay alive and healthy and safe and positive, right? When there's so much negativity, and for a lot of our families, they experience death and dying and a lot of other issues that added to the trauma. Now, the pandemic didn't bring about the inequities; it just made it more visible, and it just added another layer of trauma to a lot of our families that already were dealing with trauma. So, as a principal and as teachers and as children, we all faced the trauma, in different levels, but no one could escape it. And for teachers in schools where they were used to working with the children in person, having to deal with them virtually was a challenge in itself. And as a school leader, when I'm a very emotional and touchy-feely principal that loves to be around the children and experiencing the community. It's very hard. That's one piece of my leadership style that I had to adjust. So yeah.
Now, you talked about being afraid of things kind of going back to the way they were. What are some overall areas in New York City schooling you believe need some improvement after your time working in a school?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an advocate for equity, right? And when I look at other communities, I see the inequities that exist in the community I serve. For me as a school leader, that's hard. I want to try to create a level playing field for our families. And when I look at community centers in other communities, and then I don't see it in the community I serve, I see a lot of disparate, differences in the communities that I work in as opposed to the community where I live. It's challenging because you want your families to have the same things that you have. You want your families to be able to experience the positive life that's out there, but the inequities continue to exist, and we have to figure out how to end poverty. We have to figure out how to bring more resources to our communities. And I think it really starts with building community centers and facilities that provide a lot of support to the families. And it shouldn't be at a cost, right? Because we already know that our families can't afford it. We got to figure out how to be able to provide these services at very low or no cost to the families, so that our children, our families can experience those things that the more wealthier communities have.
Now, I think it's great that someone that's so passionate about just New York City schools and students is taking on this role, because I think that's definitely what we need. Can you just explain what are some goals the NYCESPA have moving forward just to strengthen New York City elementary schools?
Yeah, so as the president, I haven't really pushed my goals out yet, but I'm going to share them here for the first time. So one of my goals right off the bat is to provide a support for new and struggling principals, to have a network of people who can support them and help them get through challenging times, whether it's a first-year principal or it's a principal working in a very challenging community. I want to create a network of principals that can provide those supports. My second goal will be to take our organization and make it a viable professional development organization, which means we will be providing a wealth of professional development to principals, not only in our immediate communities, but throughout the city as well, so that all principals have access to professional development that is high quality. And then the third goal that I have to achieve is I want to make our organization powerful. I want elected officials, community leaders, and people to view us not only as principals, but as community leaders as well, so that we can then have the greater impact that we need to have in our communities.
Now, you're very vocal on social media and you show like all of your work and the amazing stuff that you do in the community. How can people stay up to date with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple. I'm primarily on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, it's very easy, The Bronx Principal. And on Twitter, it's Torres Real Talk. Those two platforms have been the ones that I've been able to connect with a lot of people and get resources that we need. Facebook, I usually don't really touch Facebook. And I'm on TikTok, but I just use that to create videos to share on my Instagram. So Instagram is the best way to follow and be part of the work that we're doing.
All right, Luis, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you. I appreciate you.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday. Welcome back. Not-for-profit organization Bronx Community Health Network offers mental health first aid training aimed to combat the mental health crisis. Health educator for BCHN, Jaunia Clarke, and outreach specialist Sherllay Castro joined me to discuss this new program. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us today.
Now, can you brief our viewers on the mental health crisis that is currently happening in our country?
Right, absolutely. But first, I'd like to give you a little background about Bronx Community Health Network. We are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1996 with a mission to ensure access to quality, affordable health care for Bronx residents, regardless of their ability to pay, their race, religion. We do this at 20 community-based and school-based health centers, and we are extremely proud of our community health and wellness program, which integrates health center clinical care and important community social support services such as food pantry, SNAP, housing, health insurance, jobs, and education programs that are necessary for complete wellness and optimum living. And over the last year, we've added our mental health first aid training as a component of one of the services we provide. Currently in the United States, an average of 130 people die by suicide every day. And in the last 20 years, approximately 840,000 people have died from drug overdoses, and 1 in 5 people are living with a mental illness. Even though people are hesitant to talk about it, mental health challenges are very common, and people are dealing with these challenges in various ways. And we also know that more people are struggling, especially with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and with the recent political climate.
Now, what does this crisis look like in the Bronx?
Right. Compared to the rest of New York City, Bronx residents unfortunately are experiencing higher rates of depression, higher rates of psychiatric hospitalizations, and higher rates of opioid use and drug-related deaths. We know that there's unequal access to care in general, and even more so for mental health care in the Bronx, as well as the rest of New York City. We are working really hard to close those critical gaps in care by acknowledging that access to mental health care disproportionately affects our residents due to many factors such as race, ethnicity, insurance status, as well as poverty.
Now, due to the lack of resources and preconceived ideas about mental health.
Well, I would say that mental health awareness is increasing in our communities, especially since the pandemic. More people want to get involved. The challenges are often due to the social determinants of health. Some people may want to seek mental health support, but it is not often on their priority list, considering everything else that they are managing. For example, housing issues, unemployment. What is great about the mental health first aid training that BCHN is providing is that it is flexible, it's self-paced, and virtual. Therefore, we are experiencing a great response.
Now, has it been challenging to assist people in the Bronx when it comes to this issue?
Like I said, we are having people who are constantly reaching out, interested that they want to receive this training, and thankfully, we haven't had any issues.
Now, in response to the mental health crisis in our country, your organization is offering regular mental health first aid training. Can you tell me more about this?
Yes, so every month we are providing a virtual mental health first aid training. If anyone is interested in taking this training, they can contact BCHN. We also, as you see, we have the flyer on the screen. You can visit us at bchnhealth.org, or you can go to our social media page, which is bchnhealth.org.
Now, Jaunia, what type of skills participants will receive from this course?
All right, so participants can receive a wide variety of skills from this course. At the end of the training, they will be able to evaluate the impact of early intervention on mental health challenges. They will also be able to apply the appropriate steps of the mental health first aid action plan to several scenarios. So one being when a person is showing early signs of a mental health challenge, when a person is showing worsening signs of a mental health challenge, and when a person is in crisis. And then we also focus a great deal on self-care following the application of mental health first aid, because in order to provide the service to our community, we need to make sure that we are well, in our own way. So when you use the skills that you learn in mental health first aid, you are essentially the first line of support for a person in need.
Now, I understand this will also address substance use, and you spoke a little bit about that earlier. Can you tell me about why that's so important to include this?
Right. Yeah. Substance use is something that's touching many of our communities. And many people with substance use disorders have co-occurring mental health challenges. And in this training, we teach you how to recognize those early warning signs of a substance use problem and how to respond in a crisis situation when someone has overdosed. We cover the use of naloxone, which is a medication that binds to the opioids in a person's body and effectively deactivates them until they are filtered out of the body. We also discuss how to effectively communicate to 911 and the importance of placing someone in the recovery position if they have passed out for any reason.
Now, I think this is really interesting. A lot of the time, people don't often think of the two being together, but can you tell me about the relationship between substance use and mental health issues?
So there is a risk that someone who has a substance use disorder will develop a mental health challenge. And there is also a risk that someone with mental health challenge will develop a substance use disorder. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the risk factors can be genetic or environmental. For instance, early exposure to stress and trauma. However, despite the high prevalence of comorbidity between substance use and mental health illnesses, it does not necessarily mean that one causes the other. Also, the likelihood of someone developing either a substance use disorder or mental health challenge varies from person to person.
Now, Jaunia, can you tell me, this whole program is to help people identify these issues. What would you say are some signs that people should look out for when it comes to friends, family, loved ones, when it comes to mental health or even substance use issues?
Right. So one of the things that people should look out for are just general changes. So changes in their normal behavior. Are they attending work regularly? Are they missing out on school? Things that they once enjoyed, are they still going and enjoying? If they used to go to the gym often and now you see that they're kind of laid back, they're reserved, they're not wanting to go out as much anymore. They're not spending time with family or friends. Then you want to also focus on changes in their physical appearance. So if someone was very particular about how they had their hair, they were well shaven, and now you see that they're kind of unkempt, their clothes are a little bit more dirty, they're not, taking care of themselves anymore. Or that you notice that, they are verbalizing that, I'm sad, I'm worried about things, or that, they're having trouble concentrating, whether they're at work or just in a regular conversation, you see that disconnect. Those are some of the early signs that you may notice that someone is struggling with a mental health challenge.
And Sherllay, what would you say to get somebody to speak up? I know sometimes even if you do notice something, it can be very scary to address someone about that. What would you say to encourage that person to speak up?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I think it's important to have the conversation. Oftentimes, people are scared to even ask a question to someone and say, "Hey, are you considering dying by suicide?" They may be afraid that the question might even put the idea in the person's mind, but that's actually not the case. Sometimes people, all they have to do is to actually talk about what they're experiencing. And there are times with this training, we're not typically going to diagnose, rather give people the resources that they need. So you have to be empathetic to the person's situation, make sure that you let them know that you care, that you are available to provide support, and you connect them to the resources that they need.
Now, you talked a little bit about those resources. Can you just tell me more, like what do those resources look like?
Right. So I can chime in on that. But first, I want to kind of reiterate that this mental health first aid training is not a therapy or a support group. It is intended to provide information and build skills, so similar to a standard first aid course. And as Sherllay mentioned, this course does not teach the skills to necessarily diagnose someone or become a therapist. That's not what this training is for. Early intervention is key. So participants, you're going to learn to recognize those early warning signs and symptoms and connect someone who's going through a mental health challenge to a local professional resource. And these resources include psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, as well as certified peer specialists. So we'll give you that information about local resources that you can give to someone who says, hey, I'm struggling with, a challenge. My mental health is not all great. And then there's also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is a great resource. And specific to New York City, there's also NYC Well. And these are two resources that are completely free, that offer mental health support 24/7, 365 days a year.
Now, how can people learn more about this program and your organization?
Right.
People can go to our website, which is bchnhealth.org, or they can follow us on social media at BCHN Health. You can also email us at info@bchnhealth.org, or you can call our outreach hotline number, which is 929-220-8181.
All right. Thank you both so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. And I want to remind the viewers that this is a certified course through the National Council of Mental Wellbeing. So participants will receive certification as a mental health first aider, which is valid for 3 years.
Thank you for having us. This is a very important conversation to have.
All right, that's all for our show today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kibin Alleyne, wishing you and yours safety and wellness now and always. See you next time.